MJHibbett.com. Hey, joining us on the phone right now is someone actually who called in a couple of weeks ago from Japan, our friend Karamoon. Karamoon, are you with us?
Yep, good morning from Tokyo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you. We also hear us a little bit. We hear some echo.
Censored show, and
okay, yeah, shouldn't do. I'm wearing
in fact, we're hearing, you know what, hold on a second. There's another thing playing on this computer. Just bear with us a moment while we figure out what it is. Two things playing at the same time. Wow, we didn't see this coming.
Yes, the button we didn't see.
Yeah, well,
after Adam
no, it's still playing, Orb. Still playing. We gotta kill whatever that is. Yeah, did you find it?
Yes, something that was left by a previous.
We killed the audio.
Yes.
Karamoon, are you with us?
Yes, very much with you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Very far away.
Very far away. You're in where? Tokyo?
I'm in Tokyo, which I think is about 7,000 miles from New York, something like that.
Depends which way you go. If you went around the other way, it would be probably further.
It'd be about 18,000 miles, I think, the other way.
Now, Karamoon, you've been in the hacker world for quite some time. I believe you gave a talk on Alan Turing at Hope Number 6. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. So yeah, that was quite a while ago. But yeah, I mean, I think things really started when I was sort of 4 or 5 years old, using 8-bit computers. In the UK, we had a computer called the BBC Micro, which may be kind of similar to the Trash 80, although vastly superior. And yeah, that's how I got started, really.
And you started in England, correct? And you've moved since then to Tokyo.
Yeah, so I moved to Tokyo. I moved to Tokyo twice. So the first time, I think I arrived in Tokyo on September the 11th, 2001.
Whoa. Wait a minute. That's quite a day to arrive anywhere. Wow. I didn't know that.
My first night in Japan, I was woken up by the host family who said, big news is happening. And yeah, we sat there watching TV and a day to remember.
When you arrived on September 11th, it was probably still September 10th here. So
yeah, exactly.
Wow. You've also been the co-founder of Tokyo Hackerspace. You've been involved with the Tokyo BarCamp. Is that all correct?
Yeah. So when I did Tokyo BarCamp, a friend of mine came to stay for a week. Mitch Altman. He came to stay for the Tokyo Maker Fair. Mm-hmm. So he came to BarCamp, and he had just co-founded a hackerspace in San Francisco called Noisebridge. And he gave a talk about hackerspaces, and obviously we were all very interested in that. And, I'd been familiar with hackerspaces because of being at the first CCC camp. If you remember in Final Fort? Do you remember it was in that airbase that
yes.
Been turned into a museum?
Yes, I do remember that. So we did some broadcasts from there, I believe, as well. So yeah, that was definitely a bit of history right there.
Yeah, so that if you remember, that year was when hackerspaces really sort of took off because of a couple of German hackers in the previous years had basically made it their goal to go and visit most of the hackerspaces around the world and document what was going on and what were sort of best practices. So they made a sort of hackerspace design patterns, and they sort of explained about that at the camp. And I think that was when Nick Farr had also got involved in the hackerspace movement at that point.
Wow. Well, now also there's a very serious side to your story as well, because this is what we had found out about actually shamefully last year, and we have not followed up, and we should have. You were actually given the incredibly difficult news that you had terminal cancer, that you were given 5 months to live last year, and you were looking to the community to get help to get immunotherapy, which is one of the reasons that you moved to Japan, well, happy to say that prognosis was not entirely correct, but you're still facing some real challenges and some real, I imagine, very, very difficult things that people your age should not have to face.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It's it's also very interesting. Cancer is is fascinating. I'm 37, so I was 36 last year when I was suddenly diagnosed in July, and it was a complete surprise. I didn't really have any symptoms. I picked up a chest infection on an airplane, and then when I was given some strong antibiotics to knock out the chest infection, I got really bad reaction from that. Family doctor was a bit suspicious, sent me some tests, and I was very surprised, to find out I had cancer, and then a week later to find out it was terminal. And a few days after that, found out it was not just terminal, but it was a very aggressive cancer that kills you quite quickly. So yeah, it was quite a shock, and it's been interesting. I'm quite surprised to still be alive, I guess. The immunotherapy is definitely working.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, it's just your response is, I guess it's in typical hacker fashion. You refer to it as interesting and fascinating and words like that other people might not use. But what is the hacker perspective when looking at something so incredibly dramatic as this, so scary?
So, I mean, for me, hacking is really about continually asking questions, but also for every piece of information or every kind of model of thinking, digging deeper and deeper and deeper, so peeling back the layers, finding the sort of underlying reality, and of course being very skeptical because there's a lot of disinformation about cancer. There's a lot of, rather unnecessary conspiracy theories about drug companies. I say unnecessary because, the drug companies are very, very open about how they've got everything set up to make a huge amount of money. They don't need to be suppressing cures for cancer or anything like that to make criminal amounts of money.
Right.
And of course, coming from a technology background, when you get into the world of medicine and particularly the world of medical research, it's shocking how untechnical it is, how backwards it is really. There's nothing modern about scientific medical research and drug development. They're using the same methods from 1940s, 1950s. There's no technology involved at all, or not what you and I would refer to as real technology. So, just for example, the cost of developing new drugs is going up, not down. And in fact, it doubles about every 9 years, or over a 9-year period rather. And this is referred to in the medical world as Eroom's law, which, if you think about that, it's a joke because it's Moore's law backwards.
Oh, wow.
Of course, Moore's law says that. For listeners unfamiliar with Moore's law, first of all, it's not a law at all; it's an observation. But it says essentially every year and a half, every 2 years, the transistor density in a microchip doubles, which means you can get double the computing power for the same price, or same computing power for half of what you paid 2 years ago. But in the medical world, there's very much a sort of silo culture, which means that people are in their isolated little areas. So even an oncological surgeon who you'd think would be keeping up with all the developments in cancer care, they would mainly be looking at surgery because they are a surgeon. They wouldn't know about things like hypothermia, which is a type of therapy where you treat cancer using radio waves to induce heating of organs, and that damages cancer cells in many ways. Again, a doctor who mainly uses chemotherapy wouldn't be familiar with immunotherapy or all these other treatments. So it's very, very backwards looking. The drug companies will justify this by saying, well, if we didn't do our research in our way, we wouldn't do any research at all. But it's a ridiculous hit and miss process. The drug companies investigate about 5,000 chemical agents at once. They'll find about 3, 4, 5 that are promising, and one will eventually turn into a drug. So you're mainly paying for the failures of their research when you see these incredibly expensive drugs.
Can you tell us something about the healthcare that you're getting in Japan right now? Is it sufficient to be tackling?
Yeah, so I should point out, as you said, I'm from England. So in England we have completely free. We have what's called universal healthcare, which means it's free for everybody, free at the point of treatment, I should say, because obviously we pay for it through taxation and national insurance. So I very much had the opportunity of getting treated in the UK, not paying anything at all, instead of the Japanese system, which is a hybrid system. So it's a national insurance system where we pay a monthly national insurance, maybe as an individual or maybe as a family, and then any healthcare costs, the government pays 70% of that, and the individual is expected to pay 30%. Although there's actually some flexibility there, and if you're on welfare or whatever, or financial difficulty, the government will pay all of it. So I had the option of having completely free healthcare, but I decided to come to Japan because I generally divide my time between the UK and Japan anyway, so it was an option for me. And I knew that the standard healthcare in Japan was, maybe 10 years ahead of the UK, probably only about 5 years ahead of the US. But that makes a difference when you have a terminal illness. You want every advantage possible. Mm-hmm. So I decided to have my healthcare in Japan, and also I didn't realize when I was making this decision, but once I came back to Japan, I found that there was sort of some private health care clinics run by public hospitals as a way of bringing the absolute latest treatments, the sort of really cutting edge stuff. And private healthcare was not something that was a possibility for me because of financial reasons. But my sister started crowdfunding, which in itself is quite an interesting experience. And so far the money's been coming in just about enough to cover the private healthcare as well. So for me, with my standard healthcare, I had very major surgery last August, and I have chemotherapy every 2 weeks, lasting for 3 days plus 3 or 4 days of side effects. So I live this bizarre life where I sort of have 1 week where I'm not really able to function very well as a human, and then the following week I'm kind of fine, and there's time for chemotherapy again. But in parallel to that, I'm having cutting edge treatments at a private clinic where this sounds strange, but I'm being treated with a medicine made with my own blood. So wow. I go to the clinic. I have my blood is sort of taken by a process called apheresis, which means they take the blood with a machine, I think a bit like a kidney dialysis machine. So they take the blood, they filter out the bit that they want, which in my case is the white blood cells. They kindly return my blood to me. Those white blood cells are sent off to a lab, and over a 3-week period, they go through something called expansion, which I think is just a fancy word for saying that the cells get grown in a lab. So when they return to me, they've been increased by, I think it's about 1 billion to 1 ratio. So for every white blood cell, I get 1 billion back, which, when you have cancer is very important, because cancer, not many people know what cancer really is. And cancer is really a combination of two things. It's some kind of genetic problem, and also some kind of problem with how cells naturally live, and most importantly, naturally die, so that the cancer cells are not sending the right messages to say, it's time for me to die, and the immune system should kill me. This is called PD1, program death 1, which is the name of a protein that cells should express when it's time to die. So for me, it's very important to have these extra white blood cells. And because of the lab conditions, they're very active. So these white blood cells are called NK cells, which is natural killer cells. And these are your type of white blood cell that can attack cancer cells. So they're put back into me.
Yeah,
so
it sounds like you're analyzing this as if it was a computer program that needs debugging. And the parallels, I think, are really fascinating.
Yeah, it was interesting when I first said to my oncologist, I'm pursuing these new treatments. I read a lot on the web. He was very, very skeptical. But when I explained that, I was reading the same medical papers that he reads essentially, because although most of those things are behind a paywall, obviously as a hacker, paywalls are transparent for us, and just with some reasonable Google skills, you can often find PDFs of these papers that are appearing, and the BitTorrent fairy provides us with lots of lovely information, medical training as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Cameron, I just want to give you the opportunity a couple of times to give out any website that leads to any kind of crowdfunding that you've set up. Sure.
So my website is karamoon.tech. This is one of those stupid new top-level domains. I thought I'd try it for fun. So that's Karamoon, KARAMOON.tech, TEC.
TECH,
another
right?
thing, so .tech, Karamoon.tech, and that forwards to a GoFundMe page, so people can, read my updates. They can watch my YouTube videos there, which I think are very useful if someone in your family or personal circle sadly has cancer. Another thing I've done is I wrote a list of really what I wish I had known or been told, a year ago. So I wrote my top 10 cancer tips, and I put them on a Facebook post, which is going viral, and almost 10,000 people have seen that.
Wow.
The web address for that is ridiculous, but what I've done is, I've set up another URL that forwards to that Facebook page. So that's cancertips.xyz, another one of these stupid top-level domains that are becoming...
No, that's great. That's awesome.
So people, that's an easy to remember URL, cancertips.xyz. And if you go there, you see that there's the 10 things I really wish I had been told. There's the things your doctor doesn't tell you. Like, I don't want to upset any doctors, but I think it's really important that you listen to the doctors, but you also really pay attention to the cancer nurses, because a cancer nurse may have seen the patient a couple of times a week for chemotherapy for 5 years, for hours at a time. So they're spending far more time with the patients than the doctors are. A doctor might have 5 minutes in the UK to be with a patient, maybe a bit longer in other countries. So I think listening to the cancer nurses for their anecdotal evidence about what makes a difference in cancer survival, that's really important. So it's sort of tips like that you wouldn't necessarily get from your doctor. People have been finding that useful, and it's lovely to see it. I'm no fan of Facebook, but it is lovely to see it going viral, and it's nice to think that 10,000 or so people have read that now.
Now, Cameron, this is something that unfortunately you're facing way too early in life, but it's something that we all will have to face in one way or another, whether it's somebody who's close to us, whether it's ourselves. How what would you say to people who might find themselves going down this road? Is there anything that made it easier for you to handle?
Well, I think any problem in life, there's that famous 3-step process. Number one, don't worry alone. That means you tell other people what's going on. I made a decision very early on, in the first few days to tell people as much as I knew. Number two is really get the facts. So you want to go and look out for that information. Be skeptical, particularly about what you find on the web. There's a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of cancer myths out there. But get as much information as you can. Keep getting out information through the whole process. And number three, make a clear plan. So for me, having terminal cancer, which means the cancer is expected to kill me quite soon, it's very difficult to have painful and distressing treatments like chemotherapy, but because they're not expected to cure you. But I have a clear plan. My immunotherapist and my oncologist are trying to get the cancer to a very small size so that I can then treat it with a truly space age technology like proton beam therapy, which uses a particle accelerator the weight of 2 double-decker buses, and
wow.
that kind of thing. So having a clear plan would make a big difference. And for me, I was very lucky that sort of a week after the terminal diagnosis, I met my friend Eben Upton. Maybe you saw him at Maker Faire this weekend. He invented the Raspberry Pi computer. He's a good friend of mine. He told me the story of the people in the first wave of HIV in the 80s, where treatments were coming out, but only expected to help people live a few months. But there's for a small percentage of people, they had a good response, lived a few more months, and then another treatment came along. And in fact, now in 2017, there's still a handful of people alive who were in that first wave in the 1980s, that first terrible wave of HIV. Mm-hmm. And they were just the ones who, each time they were able to get the new treatment, often in a drug trial, so experimental treatments, and they were the ones who were fortunate enough to kind of live for a few more months for the next treatment to come along. So, being told that by Eben was, that really changed my perspective, I guess.
Well, I think perspective does play a lot into this. After all, consider it was in August of last year you were told you had 5 months. That would be January of this year, and it's now almost October, and it's you're definitely beating the odds here, and I don't see why you should ever give up on thinking that you'll continue to beat the odds.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with bowel cancer, which is the type of cancer I have, and also breast cancer, it's really, really important that you don't give up, even when you're on your deathbed in hospital, because those two cancers, for various reasons, are ones where there can be sudden spontaneous response to treatment, or what's called spontaneous partial remission, because of the very complex signaling pathways in your body with the interplay of the immune system and the genetics and then the epigenetics. So that's all the environment around the DNA that affects how the DNA is interpreted. So particularly with those two cancers, but I'd say in general you never really want to give up. Make a plan and do your best, because there's nothing to be gained by giving in to cancer, really.
Absolutely, and so many other parts of life you can apply that philosophy to. Can you tell me how has the hacker community, the tech community in general, responded?
So, people have been very interested. I think that the hacker community have a very kind of healthy, skeptical mindset. So that's been very useful. My friend Bicycle Mark has worked tirelessly to promote my crowdfunding campaign. Has interviewed me several times. He's got two podcasts, Citizen Reporter, which is actually one of the oldest podcasts out there. Mm-hmm. So he's interviewed me for that, and also his newer podcast, the Realities podcast. And so he's worked tirelessly to promote my campaigning. Always whenever I've reached out to the hacker community for things. So in 2011, we had the triple disaster in northern Japan, in Tohoku, where we had the earthquake, the tsunami, and what we later found out were a nuclear meltdown. And Tokyo Hackerspace, really jumped into action, but also Tokyo Hackerspace and I personally reached out to the hacker community, and I reached out to people like Dan Kaminsky who promoted our calls for help around the world. and hackers all over the world were sending donations to Tokyo Hackerspace, and we were, because of being sort of there on the ground, we were able to go and get, give people help straight away. So I think that, the hacker community, they're always there to help out, and they're very quick, and everything is sort of based on first-hand information in the hacking community. I think it's very interesting that although we do stuff online, every 2 years thousands of people gather in New York for hope to physically be in the same space as each other and
Yes.
share those personal stories. I go to a lot of the hacker events in Europe, so things like the Chaos Communication Congress, the Chaos Communication Camp, the Hippies from Hell series as well, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very interesting that I think as hackers we know that you need to go and experience things firsthand. Don't believe what you're told through the media. Go on and get the facts and talk to the real people involved.
Have you had other people facing similar prognosis contacting you?
Yeah, so it's one of those interesting things. I think it's a big case of confirmation bias that as soon as you're directly affected by cancer, you see it everywhere. And yeah, people have contacted me a lot for advice. People have often said things like, I've read this, I've read that chemotherapy kills more people than it saves. Is it true? And I explained the origins of that myth, the flawed research, and explain the facts. And I'm no fan of chemotherapy. I absolutely hate it. It's unpleasant, and I think it's a dumb treatment, but it's unfortunately one of the best we have at the moment. So yeah, people often kind of ask me, and again from a technology point of view, and I think there's also a little bit more awareness now about things like the security issues of medical devices, which is a very big topic. Why should the CT scanner be connected to the web and be running Windows XP or whatever? So
Yes.
yeah.
Wow. Now, is there? I know you've touched upon some of the treatment options, but is there anything that you look towards as having the most promise down the road for the biggest number of people?
That's a very interesting question. So, particularly in the US, there's a lot of move towards what's called personalized medicine. So, medicine that's works for the individual person. So that would be based on genetic testing. So you have a full genome sequencing, which now can be done in I think about 24 hours or something in a lab. It's pretty quick, and maybe costs about $1,000. So it's not expensive. And then you'd be given medicines based on that. I have quite the opposite opinion that what we really need is kind of generic treatment that works for almost all cancers. So these are treatments that change the microenvironment of the tumors primarily. So cancer has a lot of protection against your immune system, but they're often off-label drugs. So these are drugs used for, let's say, diabetes or whatever, that have been found to have a good effect for cancer patients, and they're what's called cancer agnostic treatments. So they sort of work for many types of cancer, because we have to remember there are probably about 10,000 identified types of cancer now. If you talk to a geneticist, if you talk to your family doctor, they'll tell you a couple of hundred. If you talk to your cancer doctor, they might say 600 to 1,000, but the reality is far closer to 10,000. So having cancer agnostic treatments that work well for all of these things, I think that's where the big promise is. And it's important to realize that medicines themselves are very, 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 very cheap. The cost is in the development, and the cost is mainly in the failure, but the pills themselves are a couple of cents for a pill.
Karaman, I cannot express enough the admiration I think we're all feeling for you in facing this tremendous challenge with such dignity, grace, and optimism. And I think it's going to inspire an awful lot of people. One more time, can you please give out the URL so people can donate to your fund?
Yes, if people would like to donate or just to learn a bit more about it, that's karamoon.tech. It's KARAMOON.TECH. And then my cancer tips are what I wish I had, heard a year ago with my terminal diagnosis. That's cancertips.xyz.
All right. Listen, we're going to talk with you in the future. We're going to basically make sure things are going as well as they possibly can go. And I think what you're going through, what you're doing will be phenomenally important to so many people. And I hope for the best outcome for you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. And yeah, look forward to talk about lots of other more interesting things like hacker homeschooling and
yes,
and
let's do that as well, and hopefully we'll see you over in Japan as well. That's Karamoon from Tokyo, facing stage 4 cancer and a grim prognosis, but using that hacker spirit to get through it as best as possible. And that's going to do it for us here tonight on the show. You can write to us oth@2600.com with your comments, thoughts, things like that. We'll be back again next week with more news from the hacker world. Have a good night.
To help with your homework. We bought it to help with your homework and the household accounts. If your dad ever works it all out. Lunchtimes in the library, writing down the pokes and beats, copying an access code, gets a taste for home taping, fetishist of map making. Rotten leads and rubber keys, random run and loading screens, then 5 minutes, fingers crossed, hoping not to witness the terror of our tape loading error. We bought it to help with your homework. We bought it to help with your homework and the household accounts. If your dad ever works it all out. Spectrum 81, Dragon Vic and Oric 1, Commodore 64, Amsterdam and Acorn Electron, cheaper BBC Micro. Jetso Willy, Slaver Wolf, Laws of Midnight Underworld, also Transamanta Tap, and of course Manic Miner, The Hobbit, A Night Law and Elite. It made a generation who can code a bubble before proper consoles. Who all know that the games you get today, well, they might be very flash, but they'll never beat the thrill of getting through Jetpack. Oh, hey, hey, 16K, what does that get you today? You need more than that for a letter. Old school RAM packs are much better. Personal computer games, your Sinclair, 16K, Kingston Competition Pro, Crash and Cursor Keys and go to Dixon's. I bought a Saturday stuff with loops that don't end. We bought it to help with your homework. We bought it to help with your homework and the household accounts. If your dad ever works it all out. Hey, hey, 16K, what does that get you today? You need more than that for a letter. Old school RAM packs are much better. Hey, hey, 16K, what does that get you today? You need more than that for a letter. Old school RAM packs are much better. 4 n equals 0 to 2. Those were the days. Next end.